Welcome today to our ReSourceYYC podcast, Conversation with a Consultant. Today we have Lisa speaking with our co-founder, Ron. Just so you know a little about ReSourceYYC, we are a co-working space in Calgary, Alberta, and we have all sorts of offices, dedicated desks, virtual offices, as well as boardrooms and training rooms available for people to come in and use. All right, I'll pass it over to you, Ron.
Thanks, Rosemary. And I do encourage everybody to come down and check it out. We can come in live in person now that some of the COVID restrictions are lifted. So Rosemary would be happy to give you a tour. And, and thanks everyone who's joining us either live or on the podcast. One of the reasons we do this is to really help build community amongst professionals in Calgary. There's a lot of people, not only they're members of ReSourceYYC, but they're professionals here who really want to give them an opportunity to connect, meet some really interesting people. And personally, I'm a consultant as well. So I get a lot of talking to some really exceptional consultants that have a lot of experience. So today we're actually thrilled to have Lisa, I'm going to apologize if
Baril, it's Baril.
Baril, yeah, sorry, Lisa. Lisa joined us today, and Lisa is a communication and change management professional with years of coaching and facilitator and training experience. And she's worked in many sectors across Calgary, and I think literally international, for sure, Western Canada, energy, regulatory, not-for-profit, academic, and also working with industry associations. So thank you for joining us today, Lisa.
Thank you. I am happy to be here. I have to tell you, Ron, every time I call my optometrist office, they say, oh, you don't even have to say who you are. You have such a distinctive voice. We know who you are. So maybe, this is a whole podcast thing that is, starting right now.
Maybe. I got that same distinctive voice thing before there were podcasts, so I'm not sure if that's a good or bad thing for me. So anyways, but we're glad to have you not only, and actually our podcast, actually, just so people know, you can either watch a podcast on video or also on Spotify listens. So, and again, Rosemary will post this again after. So people who didn't make it today live will have a chance to listen to it. So thanks. And maybe tell us, so you and I worked together a long time ago, back in that, we won't say how long ago, but the world has changed in Calgary in the last 20 years.
Yep.
And so many people have worked together and then moved to different industries, and then some of them back again in Calgary. So maybe, do you mind telling us a bit about your journey? And
Sure.
maybe kind of how you started out, and then you've been a consultant most of the time too. So a bit about that consulting relationship.
Sure. Yeah. So we work together, Ron, all over the place, and I've worked in the energy business. And as you said, I'm a change management strategy professional. I'm also a trained facilitator, so facilitating group processes from team development to leadership development to kind of everything you can think of, even assisting with things like big roundtables and that sort of thing. Also, I customize workshops, particular training content for clients who want to focus on particular things, and kind of recently became a retirement coach as well. So we'll see where that one goes. But, my journey, it's really kind of interesting. And again, been doing this for a long time. I was working at Nova Gas Transmission. This will show how old I am, when they merged with TransCanada. And of course, with the merger, I was in communications. You got two communication teams. You're not going to have two communication teams in the new organization. And so lots of packages were offered. So one of them was start your own business package. I didn't take that one.
Oh, really?
No, I did not. I actually took the community service one because I was very interested in that. And I also thought, I'm just going to, find another job. So why would I take the start your own business package? Well, sure enough, a few months later, I finished my community service package, haven't actually found a job yet. And I'm getting these requests for, oh, can you do some contract work? Oh, could you help us with this project? And so I really kind of fell into it, I will say. So a little, I knew I always wanted to start my own business, but at that time, oh boy, how old was I? That's how many years ago? 1998.
You
Let's
were
just say 30
just a
something.
kid, right out of high school for sure.
More like 30 something. And I had thought, later I want to start my own business. I come from a family that has had their own business. My parents had their own business. So I wasn't really thinking of starting my own business at that particular stage. But, it kind of fell into my lap and I went, well, maybe I should start now. Maybe that's what I should be doing. And yeah, so that's where it started.
So maybe actually I'm curious about that because there's so many people, especially as much as things have changed, some things haven't changed. People are displaced. They're professional and that they're exactly that decision making. And then for a lot of people, the either real or more often psychological barriers to entry are huge, right? So how did you overcome that and just decide to start a business? Like, did you have to do research or?
Yeah, it was probably a few things. So, a really important foundation is to have a good network.
Yeah.
So no matter where you are, whether you're in a full-time role, whether you're, you're working at home, you're a parent working at home, whatever it is, professional network, volunteer network, whatever it looks like. Calgary, more than probably pretty much any other city in Canada, is very much about the network and how well we're connected. We're like a small town, even though we're a big city. So that's really where I started. I literally reached out to my network and said, hey, it looks like I'm kind of falling into this. Any advice? Like how should I charge and what should I do? And, so that was kind of one of my first steps. And then the other thing was, not investing a ton of dough right off the start. My philosophy was, until I have some clients and actual dough coming in, I'm not going to invest a ton of dough. Luckily, what I do doesn't, I don't require I'm not like a fitness center or, I don't require that kind of thing. But, I did stuff like I rented. I didn't actually, not even laptops at that time. It would have been a full PC. And I rented it and I worked in the corner of my second bedroom and tried to keep the cost down as much as possible, but yet still be able to do the work I needed to do, and just sort of gradually added on. And as I learned more, as I got more clients.
Any big surprises? What was the biggest surprise when you started your own business, went on your own?
What was the biggest surprise? I think sometimes just even how you get involved with a client and you're sort of so involved and you're in the work that you kind of forget to step back and go, hold on, don't have the next client yet, don't have the next project yet, I'm not thinking about that. And so, sort of learning learning maybe the hard way with having some gaps to go, I'm not making any money because I didn't think about this when I actually was really busy with work.
That's interesting. And probably part of it is when you've left a full-time job, your first consulting job can feel a bit, when you get into an office, like another full-time job, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
And it sounds like you've been treated that way. Well, from the market, but you'd never have to market yourself the same way when you're actually an employee.
For sure. And it was bumpy. It was a bumpy ride. So when I first started, well, I was going through a divorce. I had moved. I didn't realize how long it can take to get into a complicated system to get you in the pay structure. It was months before I was paid. So, there was, it was kind of a bumpy ride to start, but what's interesting about that is it didn't discourage me because I loved being a consultant. I loved the work. I loved working with clients. I loved the variety of projects. I loved that they saw me as a partner, and that I could really use my skills. So even with that bumpy ride, I stuck with it.
Perfect. Well, and it sounds like it might be the perfect segue to talk about into change management, because it sounds like did you start in communications consulting or did you start in change management?
very kind of mushed together.
Yeah.
So first contract, you're making me think back 20 years ago, Ron.
Yeah.
The first contract was communication
Mhm.
based, but I quickly moved into change management, I believe with CP Rail at the time.
Mhm.
And you know, it's all of the work that I do. So facilitation, change management, communication. So first of all, I always have to explain it to anyone. Like I seem to only take things that I have to explain to people what I
Yeah.
do.
Which
So
is why
that's
they need you, right?
yeah, that's number one. And number two is that, you know, a lot of times when you're successful in those roles, it's kind of seamless.
Mhm.
And sometimes when people say, oh, we didn't even need a facilitator, look how far we got.
Yeah.
So they actually forget that you were the cog that actually helped them move forward something that they've been stuck in for 6 months. But you know you're successful because they've taken ownership and they're really excited about the work. So you know, that's just part of what I do for
Well,
sure.
you find so a lot of I find a lot of stuff, and I think it sounds like you're saying it's a project, right? So do you find a lot of stuff you work on projects, or are they just day-to-day work?
No, it's projects,
Yeah.
initiatives. You know, I've done everything from stepping in and doing, you know, 2-day leadership retreats, helping
Mhm.
leaders build out their, you know, sort of leadership program and their leadership capacity, but using all the wisdom in the room. You know,
Yeah.
I'm the facilitator, not the
Yeah.
content expert. From assisting a client who was doing very high level roundtable discussions between 3 countries, to those longer term kind of change management projects. They tend to be sort of more on the ground, present for, you know, months at a time,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of work to do in a structured way and get alignment and in stakeholder engagement and work on how it's going to transition to operations all before you go live. So, you know, there's a lot of that, your day to day and that
Mhm.
particular kind of work. So my work really does vary. I can sometimes, you know, I'm going in to help with a session or facilitate a session or develop some training, and it's got a, you know, a tight window, and then other times I'm in this sort of longer term project scenario.
So how do you do, maybe this will be a question that probably is one of those you have to explain, but what's the difference between just a good project and change management included in a project?
Well, so the project side really focuses on the technical elements, right? Getting the technology and managing the project plan,
Mhm.
and you know, the resources, and are we on time? Are we on budget? All of those kinds of things. Whereas change management is very much focused on the people side. So
Yep.
how are the people actually going to move from where they are today to where they are tomorrow? How do we socialize them to the change? How do we help explain the change and how it's a benefit to them? How do we actually engage them so that they start to own the change? And, you know, there's a tension between, it's a good tension between project and change management, because we absolutely want to support the project and help make sure that those milestones are reached and that, you know, it's on time and on budget. But sometimes we may come back and go, the people aren't ready. So we, you know, we got to push some things out. So it's sort of that, you know, it's always that kind of balance.
And you find as a consultant, you're brought in when they reach the point where they're out of balance, or do you find you get involved right at the beginning?
It really depends.
Yeah.
You know, I've been brought in literally a month before deployment, and you know, presented with the holy cow, we didn't involve people properly. We actually didn't define what success looked like. We didn't align our leaders. Can you help us? Because we're going out in a month, right? And so I've been in that situation, and then I've been in situations where I'm really at the start, and I'm really helping even the project management and the project managers to kind of align work. So you know, it really depends.
So your communication background must have been a big help too.
For sure,
To
for
that,
sure.
right?
It's a it's a skill that's really needed in change management. And so sometimes what happens is those people with, you know, a very sort of tight, let's say subject matter expert background, they take change management and then go, okay, now I can do change management.
Yeah.
They tend to have sort of less broader skill sets than,
Mhm.
if you can bring facilitation skills to the table and communication skills to the table and strategic thinking to the table, I think those are some of the things that definitely differentiate me,
Yeah.
and that, that those are things I bring to the table. And certainly because, as you said, I've worked in so many industries like utilities, regulatory, municipal government, energy, transportation. I understand how organizations work. I have that broad business
Mhm.
acumen. And that's another thing to bring to the table that not everyone does when they come
So-
onto a project.
So it's not really a cookie cutter because your background really helps inform how to approach some of those projects as well, right?
Absolutely. And certainly there's lots of models for change
Mhm.
management. I'm not going to bore you and go into
Yeah.
all of them, but because I have been around, I know, pick this,
Yeah.
pick a little of that. Oh, hey, from my experience, you know what? We're not doing enough of this. So absolutely.
So do you find and I'm a consultant too, but I find sometimes the best way to apply a model is when the client doesn't know you're applying a model, right? It feels like it's fit for them.
Again, it goes
Yeah.
back to the seamlessness, and
Yeah.
one that goes back to sort of, how do you work with different clients?
Yeah.
And some clients they're model based. It's like, where's the model? Show me the model, show me and others are like, okay, let's go. What's the decision here? Let's go. And so even though I bring my authentic self to every project, I'm
Mhm.
still going to be as committed,
Yeah.
still going to aim to build capacity, all of those things, sense of humor, all of those things that make up me. At the same time, though, I do adapt to the client. So, a big complex energy company is going to be a lot different than a small technology firm. And so you've got to adjust your approach to the culture, to the team or the individual you're working with. And so definitely I do that. And that's where, maybe sometimes this visual model, let's see how we're going to go. Whereas other times it's like, listen, give me the 3 points I need to know and see you later.
You go, well, so what's changed over the last 20 years? And I mean, the one thing I look back and go, man, I could have done things differently myself. So I could have been different. But then a lot of the industry and people and even generations that are hitting the workforce have changed how we do our business. So what have you seen change over the last 20 years?
Well, I wasn't really ready for that question, Ron, but let me think about that. So I would say there's more intentionality to it. Contracts, you take a lot more. When I sign on, quite often there's a lot of policies I have to sign off on.
Okay.
There's kind of a lot more of that due diligence and, that side of things for sure. In terms of the client themselves, I still have the same access I've always had. Like when you build a trusting relationship and you show competency, I work between all levels, and that hasn't really changed. It's not like that's suddenly limited. Certainly the virtual world has changed things over the last definitely the last 2 years, very much so. And how you work with people in terms of, some people are at home, some people are in the office, some people are like, you have to be, that can't fluster you. You have to be prepared to deal with and go to where people are and how they're showing up. So yeah, I think if from a summary, I think that's what I'd say, just off the top of my head.
How do you find, this is one observation I had, that when I started my career, people didn't actually understand project management, and there's been huge growth in industry on how to PMPs and how to manage projects, but it's so tactical that people seem to have less understanding of the people part of the projects, right? And I don't know if that's just my observation, but from an execution point of view, there's getting to be some really good project management people, but it sounds like my impression would be what you have to offer, the people side of it actually might need more than ever, right?
For sure. And, I'm not a project manager. I'm never going to say I'm not certified in PMP, but absolutely, even just for my own business, when I have 3 or 4 clients, I've got to be able to manage projects and tasks and action plans and, figure out my time and all of those kinds of things. So that's a natural it's kind of a, maybe, I think of it as a natural skill set. Maybe people
Yeah.
don't have it, but, as a consultant, that's always there. And, from a change management perspective, I will look for a strong project manager, because you
Okay.
absolutely, the projects that I tend to probably turn down are the ones where they say, hey, can you do change management and the project management for the whole, I'm like, that's two people. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, that's two, very strong skill sets, two individuals, different lines of work. Yes, they work together tightly, but
Yeah, well, so maybe I know you can, or you don't have to give names, but do you have any project that you look back at your career and go, that was a knockout success? And kind of what things that you got to contribute as a consultant to make it so successful?
yeah, you know what? There's been a lot of projects that I've been really
Mhm.
proud to be a part of, and and they range from coming into with facilitation work,
Mhm.
and maybe without kind of naming every
Yeah.
client, but from a change perspective, I had a really great opportunity to work with the city of Edmonton,
Oh, wow.
and it was a supply chain project, and really everything was changing in that
Yeah.
area before implementing new technology. So it was a really great project. I was a real partner there. I'll give a shout out to Roxanne Kitts.
Yeah.
She's actually moved on from the city of Edmonton, but just
Yeah.
a fantastic leader, really valued people's all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of things that made that project really great for me. And even when I left, I had frontline managers and some of the staff coming to me and saying, we've been through a lot of changes, but this one, it felt like we had someone on, like, who cared about us, who cared about whether we were ready, who involved us. So that's the kind of, like, yeah, sure, you can get the big kudos
Mhm.
and the referrals, and that's all
Yeah.
fantastic. But when I have that sort of one-on-one with that client who, feels like they were included, like
Yeah.
that's really great. And then certainly from a facilitation perspective, I've done several kind of leadership and strategy sessions with
Mhm.
different organizations. And those, when those leaders walk away and go, I can't wait to get back to the office and work on this, or
Yeah.
yeah, this value statement rocks, we're taking
Yeah.
this and we're going out. That's the kind of, that you've
Yeah.
been successful, because they've just taken ownership, they're excited, they walk away after a day session or a 2-day session and they're pumped to, like, keep going. Like that really tells me that there's been success.
Well, that's awesome. And I mean, back to what the conversation at the beginning, you said sometimes when you do your best job, people don't understand what you did to make it your best. But it sounds like you actually got some recognition for
For
what you
sure.
did well, which is great, because not consultants don't always get that.
No, and it's not, for
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
I'm as committed to the client success in whatever it is they're doing that as they are. So for me, as long as they feel successful, there's been a positive impact. They said, they come back and say, we learned something, we
Yeah.
built capacity. Uh, that's good. The kudos are great, but honestly, and the other way success shows up, Ron, to be candid, is referrals, hiring back. The pats on the back are great, but that demonstrates success.
Maybe, and going back to Calgary, it's 1 degree of separation, right?
Totally.
So doing a good job is probably your best marketing for your next job. Doing a bad job could be the worst thing that happens, because everyone in town seems to find out or know, right? So
Yeah, it's
yeah.
tough. It's tough, but you know what? The reality is we're human.
Yeah.
Some projects don't go as well, and there's lots of complicated reasons why they didn't go as well. Sometimes consultants are an easy target, right? So, but I will say absolutely, like, you're and even finishing strong, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes you start a project, maybe you lose some
Yeah.
energy, but you got to finish, powerfully and strong, and provide those deliverables, because that's what's
Yeah.
remembered.
So how do you, now that we're talking about, because Calgary and the companies in Calgary are notorious for changing, like you'll be in the middle of the project. You almost have to plan in any change for unexpected change, right? Because the companies will change, definitely the commodity prices will change. There's just no shortage in change. without even planning change, right? So how do you run into any projects where that's just part of the whole process? So you just have to plan for change, right?
Projects take on a life of their own,
Mm-hmm.
and I can be in the middle of a project. You can lose the sponsor in the
Yeah.
middle of a project. I've been on projects where the project managers changed numerous times, and not necessarily for bad reasons.
Yeah.
It's changed because they've been doing such a great job
Yeah.
that somebody said, "Hey, I want you on this
Yeah.
project." And so you have to be confident in what you're bringing to the table and the approach and the value you're adding, and you're going to add that same value regardless of whether the project manager's changed, or a director's moved on, or the project has shifted in a new direction, or the initiative has been strung out 6 months longer or compressed 2 months shorter. As long as you're bringing that skill and that knowledge to the table, and you're a partner with the client, then you're going to know about that. And you gotta shift and move and adapt.
As a consultant, is there anything, on top of that you can do to mitigate, just kind of knowing that those things come up and kind of mitigate your risk as a consultant, or is it just keeping engaged in knowing those things?
I think there's a few things.
Mhm.
Once you've been around for a while and been on
Yeah.
projects and worked with a bunch of clients, there could be, you got to look at the signals, like you got to stay
Yeah.
in tune with what's happening in the not just on your project, but in the organization,
Yeah.
right? You're on a project and there's a big message from the top talking about layoffs, and you know what? That project you're on might be impacted, right? Like you got to stay attuned to that kind of thing. And then the other thing for me, just as a consultant, that's I guess kept me pretty active and busy for 20 years, is I have a number of lines of related business.
Mm.
So let's say, not a big year for change management,
Yeah.
lots of projects got canceled. Okay, well, let's start building, doing the development for some of the facilitation work or the training work I'm doing, or, so I think it's important to probably have more than one focus.
It's like so many people that are going through kind of life changes, especially got laid off or something, being able to pivot is big, but it literally, you plan for pivoting when you need to then, right? It sounds like your consulting's a bit on a pivot, so you can go either way, right? So,
Well, the last 2 years are a perfect example.
Yeah.
I certainly wasn't ready to go to the level of virtual facilitation of where it was. It took a bit to get up to that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, because of the situation, change management work really kicked up, and because everybody's moving to remote and there's all this stuff going on. So having a few lines of business helps you be able to jump into one, move to another. Sometimes it keeps you oversubscribed, I will say that. Sometimes you're a little bit too busy, but I think that's important. And then just, I think from a behind the scenes place, you want to make sure that you're prepared financially, that your family, whatever those supports that you need to have in place, because frankly, no matter what, I've had blank spots,
Yeah.
not too long, but sometimes it's 3 months and you go, oh boy, that's not a good place to be. But the reality is, as a consultant, that can certainly happen for sometimes no fault of your own. So what have how have you made sure that personally you're also prepared for that?
Good advice. So best part of being a consultant, what is it?
I think it just gives me meaning. The ability to use my skills and my background and the variety of clients and building those relationships and walking away and going, I made a difference. That somehow that client or that organization or that team was better because I was there. Like that's really what makes me happy at the end of the day.
Awesome. And hardest part about being a consultant?
Back to what we talked about, never kind of knowing what your income's going to be. And, as much as you can kind of reduce that feast or famine thing, it's always there to some degree. You just kind of never know.
So risk tolerance, some advice, you don't want to give too much advice to people, because I actually think everybody should try some stuff, but it really, your risk tolerance will depend on how well you'll be able to cope as a consultant, I would say, a lot of times too, right?
Yeah, well, you have to figure that out, right? Like, what is my tolerance, and do I have support? Do I have a partner who has a steady, income, or can take care of the kids, or, whatever, and some people say, no, I'm jumping all in. And that's, you know what? No, great. you go for it in whatever way that matches your, your level of risk tolerance.
So any tips or tricks or anything you learned, little secrets you learned along the way that you wish you'd known right from day one?
I think one of the biggest ones is around, believe it or not, communications and communicating with the client on a regular basis as you're making progress or as you're doing things. So whether that's a weekly, a formal weekly report or a touch point, because a lot of times in the work we do, you're doing a lot behind the scenes. And so they may be saying, well, are they doing anything for me? I haven't heard from them for 2 weeks, but you're actually doing a lot, but you're not being intentional and letting the client know, hey, we reached this milestone, working on this, I'm going to touch base with you here. And I think that that's really important. I've learned that's really important to do with clients for sure.
That's great advice, because I think people, especially at the executive level, if you're working with an executive, they think their time is too busy to be bothered. But in fact, what I've learned along the way is if you actually intentionally take 15 minutes of their time and bring them right up to speed, it's worth, they don't want 100 emails, right? They don't need any report yet. They don't need all that stuff, because their time is valuable. They'd actually rather have 15 minutes every other week to get them up to speed. And I think that's a learning lesson, because a lot of people feel that would be a waste of their sponsors' time or the executive time. And in fact, it's the complete opposite. Right?
Yeah, or they feel that, well, I'm working so much and they know I'm working on stuff, so I don't need to tell them, right? It's that whole, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them you told them, right? So well, as we agreed on these 5 things, this is what I'm working on this week, if you know what I mean, and really being intentional about that.
Super is important as a consultant, because your income depends on it. I would say that advice goes well even as an employee, right?
For sure.
So
for sure.
Yeah, good. Okay. You know what? We won't try to keep it within a half an hour, but any any good books, any must reads for consultants or in your line of change management?
I go to webinars, and I've subscribed to too many things actually, because I keep having to take off subscription lists. I would say just, really broadly, and it doesn't have to be targeted, like stay on top of what's happening in society, on where people are, trends, keep on top of the macro and the micro. I do like Harvard Business Review. It's something that I sort of pull from on a regular basis, but I think you got to be broad, and don't just focus on one particular sort of channel.
And any association or networking that you try to be involved in?
Yeah, well, I'm a member of 5 professional associations. So I'm actually probably not as good at staying on top of all of them as I should, but as a principle, I would say at the very least, join. If there's a professional association for what you do, join it. It's networking. It shows that you're serious about your profession. There's usually ways to move up and get accredited. I'm accredited in communications. I'm accredited in facilitation and change management. So at the very least, belong to a professional association if that relates to what you do.
Excellent. Not 5, 6?
Well, it's kind of expensive. It's a little
draw the line at 6.
Yeah. 6 is my limit. 6 is my limit.
Okay, there's some wise advice. Don't go any more than 5 associations.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
That's great. Anything we didn't talk about that if we had some consultant on the line, a wannabe consultant, or someone who's struggling that we didn't talk about, that you'd maybe share some advice?
I think just reach out to build that network. I see so many people in full-time roles who don't, they don't even have a LinkedIn profile, or their LinkedIn profile, like at the very least, my website is sad. I'm going to admit it right now. It's sad. It has had no attention. So I tend to really focus on LinkedIn. Even if you're in a job, like that job can change, the situations can change. We've seen 2 years of holy cow, what the heck? And, at the very least, like have something that's going to help you to build that network. It's just so critical.
And speaking of that, how can people get a hold of you if they listen to this and say, I need Lisa to come help me? How do they get a hold of you?
Reach out on LinkedIn, Lisa
Yeah.
Baril, just reach out on LinkedIn. I answer all my messages. And so like, yeah, just reach out there. If you, that's probably the easiest. I'm not going to send you to my website. I said, it's
Okay.
sad. I don't even want you to go to my website.
Oh, perfect. Okay, that's the advice. Do not go to their website. But what we will do is we'll post along with the podcast, we'll post your link to your LinkedIn. So
For
Lisa,
sure.
thanks so much for joining us today. It's St. Patrick's Day, so you can go have a green beer now.
I've got a touch of green on. I do.
Whoa, that's a little emerald there, it looks like. So
No,
awesome.
not real.
So
But no one can
good.
pinch you.
That's right.
Exactly. I'll have to get some green on, I guess.
Yeah, you better hurry up, Ron.
Good. Well, thanks for joining us today. And I look forward to we're getting to a point that are some of our next ones, hopefully we're doing in person. So I appreciate you joining us on Zoom. And Rosemary, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks so much.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa and Ron. That was a great conversation, and I hope everyone can pull some good ideas from that, be it on small things like updating your LinkedIn or the bigger picture. So hope everyone had a great time and enjoyed the conversation. Feel free to check out ReSourceYYC if you want to learn more about us, or if you have any comments or questions, reach out. All right, and hope everyone has a great day. Bye.
Thanks, Lisa and Rosemary.